Welcome to High Stakes. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn. On this show, I chat with authors about the moments in their stories that change everything, what's at stake, what it costs, and why we can't look away. From thrillers to romance to sci-fi and beyond. Let's get to it. Joining me today is author Matt Harry to talk about his new dystopian mystery, Ashland. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Tracy.
I'm very happy to have you here. This was a really wonderful book, a lot of fun, a little terrifying, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I guess I should also add to your list of accomplishments. You're an editor, a screenwriter, a director, a producer, and as I said, I'm going to add in there podcast host terrorizer too. After reading about Xenobots.
Yeah, I feel like I also I teach writing and filmmaking. That's actually my day
Oh,
job primarily.
okay.
But I always tell my students, I think if you're going to be a creative person, it's like get used to doing a lot of different things, having a lot of different
Yeah.
plates spinning, you know?
Yeah. I agree. It's there might have been a time when you could just, kind of stick to one thing and make a career out of it, but it doesn't feel like that anymore. There are some who manage it, but it can be a tough business. Hollywood as well as being a novelist, I'm sure. So,
Yeah, and I mean, to me, I actually like, I think I realized early on, because I worked a couple of jobs where it was like an office job, and you're
mm,
just there 9 to 5, and that the grind of that every day,
oh
5 days a week was
yeah.
brutal for my brain. So I actually like being able to kind of jump back and forth, doing a lot of different things, having kind of a different schedule. I think it keeps my mind active.
No, that's great. So, are you able to work on more than one project at a time
I
successfully?
I mean, I always have to,
Okay, okay.
because I always feel like there's multiple things happening at the same time. In terms of writing, I feel like I can only really be drafting one thing at a time.
Okay, yeah.
There are times where I'll have to like one day I'll be working on something and then the next day I'll have to go work on something else. But it's very difficult to on the same day like creatively write one thing and then another thing and then another thing.
Yeah.
It's just hard. You have to really like let yourself sink into the world and the characters and the
Hmm.
voices, I think. So I prefer to be doing like a chunk of time drafting on one thing, but then I can be editing and marketing and doing other stuff on other projects.
Yeah, it does tend to work out. I know that you have other books that you've published and authored, and there comes a time in the process where you're writing a book, you're editing a book, and you're marketing a book.
Yep.
Sometimes they get all kind of mushed together, and
Hmm.
those are very different sides of your brain, a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
them. So,
And some I'm better at than others.
yeah, it's true.
I
It's true.
remember I actually hired a publicist for this novel, Ashland, because it's my first mystery, it's my first adult novel, it's my first sci-fi novel. So I was like, I think I need someone
Yeah.
else's help. And one of the first things she told me was, don't ask people to buy your book. And immediately I was out of ideas after that. I was like, well, what else do I do? So it was hard. It
Yeah.
was an adjustment, you know?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have a very interesting life, and I know a lot of folks probably are very interested in hearing more about that. But I have to tell you, until I read Ashland, I was blissfully unaware of Xenobots, and and now that's like all I can think about, which I'm
Oh, I'm
sure as an
sorry.
author, yeah, I know, right? That's what I was gonna say. As an author, I'm sure you're loving, love hearing that because I'm going to talk about it to other people at this point. But yeah, I want to I guess we'll probably get into this a little bit later, but it's such an interesting topic, and I know that yours are Xenobots that have gone wrong.
Mhm.
More so than what they were intended for. But do you recall where you came into contact with this particular little
Yeah, it was a
entity?
little bit of a hunt actually because I had the concept for this world really early on. I can almost date it to the minute
Okay.
because it was a couple weeks into the COVID-19 pandemic. I was walking through our neighborhood with my family, and like all the streets were empty, everybody was inside. And I remember thinking, kind of in my writer brain, like, how could this be worse right now?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, at least we can go outside. Like, what if we could never go outside again? And as soon as I had that question, I was like, oh, all right, what would cause that? And that search took me, I think, several months to figure out. I was even kind of deep into a draft before I really kind of settled on it because I did a lot of research. I was like, is it a bacteria? Is it a virus? Is it an alien thing? I talked to a roboticist about this old sci-fi theory called gray goo, like self-replicating
Yeah.
machines that would take over the world. And none of them were quite right for what I needed for the story. And then I was doing some looking around and I saw this video, like an internet video about these things called xenobots, which are basically organic cells that scientists can program to do little tasks. And they're developing them to do things like deliver medicine, like kill a cancer cell, which sounds great. But immediately, again, the writer brain is like, what
Yeah.
if you screwed that up? What would then happen? Because you basically have like a little cell that can replicate, but these ones target muscle proteins of like higher mammals. So they want to eat muscle instead of cancer proteins. And so they get out and then it goes very wrong.
It goes very, very wrong. And not only do they eat it, they snarf it down like in less than 5 minutes. You're like
Yeah.
a human being is just like gone at this point,
Yeah.
right?
They
So
basically can kill a human in 5 minutes if you're not wearing like
yeah.
a hazmat suit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, before we dive too deeply into Ashland, would you mind just sharing a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. I've basically, like you kind of hinted at, I've been a creator for a long time. That's been my interest in like telling stories ever since I was a little kid. But I kind of grew up pre-internet in the Midwest, so I didn't really know people who did that for a living. And it wasn't until I went to college that I realized there were other people who made movies. You know, when I watched movies, I was like, oh, I think just the actors show up. And I knew there were directors, but I didn't realize how many crew jobs there were. And so I applied to film school to learn how to make movies and then came out to Los Angeles to go to film school and then just kind of stayed out here and worked for several years as a editor, you know, editing TV shows and as a writer. And I had some success, nothing huge. And then I remember pitching my film agent at the time. I had an idea for a movie, and he kind of was like, yeah, I don't think anyone's going to buy this because it's such a big idea and it's not based on anything. You know, this was even back in 2012. People were like, we need IP, it needs to be based on something. He's like, I wish you'd written a book, but you don't want to write a book. You want to write a screenplay. So as I was driving home, I was like, well, I'll just turn it into a book then. But that took several years. I had to
Yeah.
basically teach myself how to transition from
Yeah.
screenwriting to writing novels, which is very different. But that book did end up getting published. That was my first novel, and it was called Sorcery for Beginners. That was published in 2017. And then in 2019, it actually got optioned, and I was hired to write it as a TV pilot.
Oh,
So it
nice.
eventually came kind of full circle.
Yeah.
And that still hasn't been made into a show, but I did get the rights back, so we're still trying to have that happen. And since then, I've written a couple other books, again, mostly for kid stuff, because that was the first thing I'd published.
Hmm.
And then I had this idea, and actually, I always had preferred, you know, I was a huge sci-fi fan. I always loved reading sci-fi and genre stuff. But I think because I liked it so much, I was a little resistant.
Mm,
You know how if you know something really well, you're like,
right.
well, I don't know if I can do that. It seems
Right.
so hard. But yeah, I just kept working on this idea. So I had this idea for Ashland in 2020, and then yeah, 6 years later, the book is now out.
Oh, that's great. And it's a wonderful blend of genres to me. It's you've got the dystopian in there, you have sci-fi in there, you've got mystery, a detective, a lot of action. And so it feels really big to me.
Hmm.
And I guess maybe before we get too far into it, can you give us kind of like the summary of what the story? We've talked about the Xenobots, but what is the
Right.
story about?
Yeah, so it's basically set in a world where 2 years ago, kind of very future, close to our present, these plague of these flesh-eating xenobots, these little microscopic cells that can replicate, or were accidentally released into the world. And it starts off in France, and so they're kind of moving slowly eastward across the world. And people are trying to figure out how to deal with them, and they can't get rid of them. So By the time we start the novel, it's been 2 years. The people of Los Angeles have managed to seal themselves inside, and nobody goes outside except in hazmat suits, which is really dangerous. And so our main character is this guy named Kai Braddock, who is a former cop that's now kind of a bounty hunter, private detective who basically flies around looking for missing people using drones. And he's divorced. He lives by himself. His family is across the city. So he can't see his sons or his ex-wife except on Zoom, like we're doing right now. And then he's hired to find a missing scientist. And as he's trying to track her down, his partner, who actually goes out into the world, is murdered right in front of him. And so Kai realizes he's going to have to do something almost nobody has done in 2 years, which is he's going to have to go outside to figure out what happened.
Yeah, yeah. And then lots of really incredibly scary things happen after that, right?
Yeah, and what was fun for me was because I didn't start with a detective novel. Like I started with the world, like I said. So it took me a while to figure out what story do I want to put in this world. I thought, is it a romance? Is it
Mm.
like a political thriller? And then I was thinking about LA because I wanted to set it in LA where I live. And I was like, there's such a great tradition of detective stories. But in this world, being a detective would be so hard because you can't talk to people in person, you can't collect evidence. So immediately, I was like, I love that. Like, I love all those
Yeah.
obstacles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll get to the to Kai here in a second, but just touching on the Xenobots a little bit. Whenever I first started reading, the book and got the Xenobot in my head, I was thinking like a little tiny robot, like a metal robot, but that's not what these are, right? They're actually more organic.
Yeah, they're kind of created organic cells, which scientists are doing more and more now because they're realizing they can, kind of slightly adjust the way the cells in our body work. And they're much more used to our bodies interacting with them. Like if you try to put a metal thing in a human's body, the body is going to much more likely reject it because it's like, well, this is a foreign object. But if you can introduce a cell, it's more like going to be accepted and can kind of do stuff. So they're just starting this technology, which is cool technology. But again, oftentimes in fiction, my wife calls it depressing sci-fi because we're always thinking like, well, how could this kind of go wrong? But
You
I
know,
also feel like the purpose of sci-fi is to say like, let's be aware of this as we move forward.
Yeah, let's not let this happen. These are the things
Exactly.
that we don't want to happen because the Xenobots, I didn't know anything about them, obviously, as I mentioned. And so I went out and I did a little digging around about them. And, if they're used appropriately and there's not some bad coding like in your book that happens, they actually sound like a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
I think I had read that they want to use them to destroy like the microplastics in the ocean and
Yep.
like plaque in your arteries and cool things like that. And
Yeah,
but what
Alzheimer's, they're doing research to like destroy the proteins that build up in the brain that create Alzheimer's. Like, so there's really
ah
cool things they
that
could
would
do
be
with it.
yeah, that would be amazing. Oh, that would be wonderful. I don't I assume you probably whenever you did your research you came across how the Xenobots were made with the frog. Did you come
Yeah, I
across
read
that?
I read an article about that. Yeah, so like
Oh my
they use the frog cells to help kind of figure it out. I tried to read
God.
some of the white papers, and that was a little beyond me.
Well, I just did the summary that comes up on
Yeah,
Google, and
exactly.
yeah, and it's funny because it was called like the African clawed frog or something like that because of its little feet are weird or something,
Mhm.
and but its genus was like Xenopus or Xenopus or something like that, which I guess is where they're getting the Xenobot from, which I thought was really interesting. I love learning about origins and things
Yeah,
like
me
that.
too.
So that I
Me
find
too.
that really exciting and that I guess that the frog, it's such a nasty little frog that a lot of the US states have outlawed it
Hmm.
because it's like a predator and it carries some kind of fungus that kills off all the other frogs.
Yeah, yeah.
So perfect for your story. It's a perfect tie-in for your
I mean, it
story.
really is amazing. Like all the things that we have that exist in nature,
Uh,
like the fact that I was reading recently that they have this thing called the wood wide web because they found that trees can communicate each other across a forest. So if there's a
yes.
fire at one end of a forest, the trees will send out messages, like enzyme messages, through the root system, so the other trees will start hardening the bark of their
Isn't that
tree
amazing?
trunks. Unbelievable, right?
I know. I know. It's just so amazing. And so it kind of brings, it brought to, when I first heard that, it brought to mind, I don't know if you're a Tolkien family or fan or
Oh
not,
yeah,
but
of course.
the the trees, you
Yeah, the
know?
Ents. Yeah.
I was like, it was perfect, perfect, perfect. Well, for the first, I don't know, maybe about third or so of this book, we saw the world through the eyes of your detective Kai, but through his drone, right? Which I thought was, I know that might sound like a little strange to some viewers, but it was a really cool experience. And I would get so absorbed in the scene that I would forget that Kai was interacting with, like his surrogate,
Yeah.
his friend that you had mentioned,
Mhm.
a character or another. Sometimes he would be interacting drone to drone.
Right.
And it would really jar me for a second whenever he would like rip off his VR goggles or visor or whatever, and he's like just in his apartment. And I thought that I was so well done because I would actually forget I was reading it through the drone, if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. That's great to hear. I mean, that was one of the things that I realized once people are going to be using these things. And again, it was kind of drawing off of that time in COVID where we were all on Zoom with each other and we had to figure out the etiquette of Zoom. I
Yeah.
realized, oh, there'd be like a drone etiquette. So yeah, like there's a scene where he like goes into someone's house. He's in the drone. He can kind of pan his camera lens back and forth, but at some point someone picks him up and I was
Yes.
like, "Oh, that's a faux pas. Like
I love that.
you can't pick up someone else's drone and move them. It's like grabbing a blind person, you know what I mean? Like don't do that."
Yes, yes, like get your hands off my drone. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a, I love that. I remember that scene too. That was great. That was great. Well,
Cool.
on this show, we like to talk about a story's stakes. I always joke, love, death, the fate of the realm are all high stakes in a story. But what I'd like to hear your thoughts on is what was personally at stake for Kai in this book?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I remember seeing that on your other podcasts. I think it's such a great way to think about it because if you don't have that emotional component, it's never going to feel as big. It's just a funny thing about humans, right? You could be talking about the end of the world, and in this one, there's gigantic stakes. Like 20% of humanity has been killed
Yeah,
off by this thing, by these xenobots,
yeah,
and so everyone's living in this constant state of fear and anxiety about going outside, about their windows cracking and these things getting in. Um, but it doesn't feel like the biggest thing, right? It feels
yeah,
like the biggest thing, especially for Kai, is can he be the person that I think his family wants him to be? And when we start, he's very bitter. His divorce is very fresh. He got divorced because he was so down on who he was and the state of the world, and he couldn't kind of hide it, keep it from his family. And so he had to like move out of his house. And so I think the journey of the book is can he find hope? Can he find a way to
yeah,
be selfless and sacrifice himself in a selfless way for, I think the overall theme is like we're stronger when we help each other as opposed to just helping ourselves.
yeah,
And can
yeah,
he do that over the course of this novel when, especially in a time when it's like people are just trying to watch out for themselves, like
right.
just worrying about their own survival and very kind of tunnel vision.
Hmm.
And to me, there were a lot of echoes in kind of what we're seeing right now in the world. So ultimately, I hope it is hopeful. And I've had a couple
Yeah,
people, reviewers who have read it and said like, it is like, even though it's in a dystopia, it obviously you come away from it feeling like, okay, we can figure this out. Like if we can figure this out, we can solve our own problems, you know?
yeah, yeah. No, I agree, and I thought you had some very I don't know, intimate's not quite the right word, but you had a couple of moments there where, Kai and his ex-wife, they were dealing with some emotional um, issues with their sons.
Hmm.
Each son was dealing with it slightly different, but his youngest son, I think, was it Jacob? Do I have the name right?
Yeah,
Jacob?
yeah. Jacob and Mikey.
Jacob, who just was so scared that that one of the seals would break, or if especially towards the end, he was hearing noises and things like that. And I thought you handled that all really, really well. And I'm sure, some kids dealt with those types of same emotions during the pandemic,
Mhm.
because they might have been feeding off of their parents' fears and things like that
Yeah.
at the
So it was
time.
very much that stuff was, and I'm glad to hear you say that because those scenes were very close to my own personal
Mm,
life. But I always say being a writer is kind of like being a method actor in a way.
yeah,
Like you put yourself in the scene and try to feel it. So
yeah,
I would go off to write this stuff, and I'm not divorced. I have a great relationship with my wife and kids, I hope. But
yeah.
but I would go have to put myself in the mindset of like, what if I did get divorced? What would that be like? What if my kids didn't listen to me and didn't want to talk to me? And so it was very tough to be in that place emotionally. And I remember feeling so grateful every day. I would come home and like hug my family, and they're like, "What's the big deal? Like you're only gone for 2 hours." I was like, "You don't understand. I was
Yeah.
divorced. I was like living in this whole mindset."
Yeah, yeah. Well, the first Zoom family dinner was really painful to watch,
Yeah,
because of all the things that you just said. It's that he could feel that disconnect happening between him and his family, and he didn't like it, and he didn't know
right.
how to fix it, right?
And how do
So,
you parent over Zoom?
yeah, I know,
Like you're
right?
not in the room. I mean, how it's like the ultimate kind of detachment of like you can sit there and say, "Hey, stop doing that." Like because the older brother is messing with the younger brother and pretending to like break the window, and the younger
Yeah,
brother's freaking out.
I
Very something
know.
my kids have done a million times, that kind of stuff
Right.
to each other. But Kai can't do anything. He can just like be shouting, "Stop it, stop it, stop it!" But he's a face on a computer.
Yeah. Yeah. And kids pick up on that, don't they?
Oh yeah, they know
Uh,
when you can't intervene.
yes, yes, yes. So I want to talk about airlocks. And I know that's kind of a funny question, but I want to talk about airlocks. I love sci-fi movies. I think Aliens, the second one,
Oh,
remains one of the
amazing.
most influential movies of my life. Uh, but I haven't read a lot of sci-fi. So I have to ask, how did the airlocks get rid of those little xenobots? I kept worrying
Yeah, yeah.
that one of those little indestructible critters were going to get through, but so I couldn't quite figure out how the airlock system worked since they're like
So
indestructible,
there's
right?
yeah, so but there's certain things you can do. They're not. It's not that they're indestructible. You can destroy them, but there's so many of the other ones. They just kind of come back in immediately. They've like kind of blanketed the whole area. So if you destroy one little pocket, it's like there's just more of it's going to move in. So you
Okay.
can do a little localized thing.
Okay.
And again, I had to do research about different ways of doing airlocks, like how they do stuff at the CDC when they're dealing with infectious diseases and stuff like that. They go through a system of airlocks to contain it so these things don't get out. And there's a couple ways. One is having like really strong kind of almost vacuum suction to where they create almost a vacuum kind of space. So there's literally like no air within the airlock, and they pull everything out through these filters. Another way is to have some kind of toxic gas that they get sprayed with that will
Okay.
kill almost anything. And then another thing I found, this is a new technology, but there's these like beams now that are almost like kind of laser beams that can kind of scan the outer layer stuff and kind of kill stuff in that way.
Oh,
So
okay.
each of those three methods you kind of see in the
Okay.
novel. And there's also a little bit, of course, of like the it's sci-fi. We're going to accept that this
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
this kind of thing works, but
Yeah, I had it in my head that they couldn't be killed. And so I was just like, "Oh my gosh, what is it that they're doing here that they are getting rid of them?" So I'm glad you explained it. I must have missed something in there, so that's my bad. All right, great. Well, just switching gears a little bit here. We've all obviously uncovered some fun facts about you, but can you think of anything that readers might be surprised to learn about you?
um, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, one of the things I was just talking about the other day was I started as an actor, which feels so funny for me to say now. Like when I was, again, I was very interested in telling stories when I was a little kid. And so I did this youth theater stuff when I was a kid. And I was very invested in that. Like I was the president of my drama club. I did all the plays and stuff in high school. And it wasn't until I started going to college that I realized I think I'm more comfortable behind the scenes
Yeah.
and I'm more interested in the writing aspect. But I can still dial that in sometimes. So like I was doing some videos, like marketing videos earlier, I'm really good at like impressions. Like I've always been really good at
Okay.
having a good ear for impressions and stuff. So I did this whole series of videos on TikTok of like me doing impressions of like Simpsons characters, of famous
Oh,
actors and stuff. And so I think that's kind of a surprising thing when people would meet me. You would think that that would be a thing you could do, but
no, that's great. I'm gonna have to go look you up on TikTok now because
oh no.
I would love to watch that. Yeah, well, that's great too that you have that skill set because we as authors, we are encouraged to get our faces out there and put
Right.
up some fun things on, Instagram, TikTok, things like that. It helps humanize us as I feel like I'm constantly saying these days. So that's great that you have that and that you're not so, uh, it's introverted. That's the word I was looking
I
for.
mean, I feel like I
Introverted, yeah.
am. It's like my dad calls me an extroverted introvert. Like I
Yeah.
can turn it on and be big and have fun and stuff and entertain people, but then it's like I have to go home and recover for eight hours.
Yeah,
You know?
decompress, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
but I was telling you a little earlier before we started, just started doing a podcast. It's not out yet. It's going to launch in June, but that's an opportunity on the podcast to do different voices. So my
Nice.
co-host Jesse is always like, "What voice are you going to do this episode?"
Oh,
It's good
that's
to have those
fun.
outlets.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can add podcaster to your resume too as well. That's great. That's great. Well, before we go, can you share what's coming up next? Will we see any more detective or I guess he's not technically a detective, but
Yeah, he's a
will we
detective.
his
Sure.
his former detective, I guess. Yeah,
I feel like he's a
Kai.
private detective now. He was
There you go.
a police detective, and then he quit the department, and now he's like a private detective.
Perfect. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I have ideas for at least two more novels in this series. And then again, I started with the world, so I even have like I wrote a short story already, like a different short story set in this world. I have other ideas for short stories, so I'd love to keep working on Ashland novels.
Oh, good.
I have a new sci-fi kind of action novel that I'm like editing it right now, and hopefully going to start querying that soon. And then, yeah, like I said, I have a new podcast that's kind of a storytelling podcast called Monster v. Monster that I'm co-hosting that launches in June.
What was it? Monster View Monster?
Monster v. Monster. So
Oh, like versus.
it's
Okay.
like me and my co-host Jesse, we bring on a guest every week and they tell us about their favorite monster and then she picks like a monster to kind of go head to head and we do this little role-playing encounter with them, which is really fun.
Okay. Okay. I love that. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure I see that too. That's gonna in June, you said? That's gonna
Yeah,
pop
June
up in
2nd
June.
is our first episode. There's a trailer out now. You can like if you search for Monster v Monster podcast, you can find it. But
Okay,
it's been
cool.
really fun and we just had someone on who said he's like I do podcasts all the time and this is like a different take on it because
Absolutely.
it's like you can't kind of
Yeah.
hide when you're role playing. You make choices and it's fun to see how people's personalities come out.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Well, folks, be sure to order your copy of Ashland today. You can learn more about Matt by visiting his website at mattharrywriter.com, where you'll find all of his social media links. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Tracy. This is great.
That's it for today's high stakes story. Follow the show so the next episode lands right in your feed. And if you enjoyed today's chat, a quick rating or review helps new listeners find us. Visit tracydevlyn.com/podcast for show notes and links to today's amazing guest and their fabulous book. High Stakes is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Thanks for listening. Until next time, enjoy the adventure, everyone.